What is the most concerning misinformation you've heard about the human body? Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to the Vancher channel. Also, please share your thoughts on this video in the comments. Let's get started. Story 1. This question is inspired by my neighbor who just told me that styrofoam turns into glass inside your stomach. Story 2. My dad was convinced that women have one rib more than men because Eve was made out of one of Adam's. Story 3. I've had a man say to me that he doesn't like when women use tampons because it's similar to intimacy and we get enjoyment out of it. Buddy boy, I can assure you that it's nowhere near intimacy and that we have absolutely no enjoyment in inserting them or removing them. Not everything that goes into the female body part feels good. Stop sexualizing a very unsexy and uncomfortable act. Answer. I dated a dude in high school who broke up with me and told everyone I'd cheated on him. I went to my gyno and had my yearly pap smear. My gyno back then was a man. My ex said that counts as cheating because you enjoyed it. Dude, first of all, no one, anywhere, ever, has ever enjoyed a pap smear. Secondly, why do you assume I like it? He said, because you women like it when anything is in there. I definitely beg to differ. Ever had one of those long hairs stuck up there that feels so alien to pull out of you? Not pleasurable in any way. When I asked him if tampons were cheating too, he got this blank look on his face and said no, but said it like a question. You know where your voice gets higher at the end? Story 4. I once had a coworker, young guy, who thought a woman's period was like pooping, that a woman could just hold it in if it was an inconvenient time. I had to take him aside and give him a crash course in what his school failed to teach. Watching the gears turn in his head as I explained things was both fascinating and disheartening. Story 5. A lot of comments here are about the female reproductive system. Apparently, it's as mysterious as a black hole. Story 6. A doctor once told me the cervix has no nerve endings. While I was crying from pain and almost fainting because she decided to grab my cervix with the speculum extra firmly and use 2 swabs for the pap sample instead of just 1. I quickly found another doctor. A few decades later, and I'm cervix-free and greatly looking forward to less pain. But that was some bullshit, and she used it to be abusive. When I requested to switch providers, I found out that I was not the only unhappy patient, and in fact, they fired her a few months later. Story 7. When I was a kid, my dad used to tell me that girls were actually just boys who had cried too much, and their male body part had fallen off. So anytime I wouldn't stop crying, my dad would remind me of this, and I'd force myself to stop in order to save my own male body part. Story 8. I recently heard someone say, if you drink lemon water every day, you'll never get the common cold again. Story 9. Certainly not the most concerning, but I dislike it when people have this idea that large labia is equal to having a loose female body part. Utter nonsense. Answer. It's crazy. It's literally just more skin than the next lady. The labia is outside. I get enraged when a woman is wearing tight pants or an outfit, and you see the natural curve of her pubic mons. And men and even other women will say, gasp, she looks like she has a male body part. First of all, stop staring so hard and reducing our human selves to parts. Second, ladies, seriously, learn about your own bodies. Story 10. I once overheard a woman in a store saying that she takes vitamins for horses because they are cheaper and come in larger packages. She said that a horse and a human are almost the same. Answer. NGL. Back when I played softball in my teens, a lot of us, including myself, would use icy hot that was meant for horses, as it was just way stronger. The theory was that since horses have much bigger muscles than us, the manufacturers had to make the stuff stronger for it to penetrate all the way through. However, I have absolutely zero evidence of this, nor have I ever tried to find any either. LOL. Story 11. Had a whole argument in college with 2 of my roommates who were insistent that birth control pills let you release eggs that are just infertile. Could not get them to understand why that was insane, or to understand that the idea is to not release an egg at all. Answer. You can still ovulate on the mini pill, which is why it's got a smaller window of time you're recommended to take it. It makes the mucus lining less hospitable to eggs. But to your point, estrogen-based BC pills do prevent ovulation and are the more commonly thought of birth control pill, So I'm not trying to pill-splain, just wanted to add the trivia to the thread. Even low estrogen pills gave me migraines, so I was on the mini pill for most of my adult life. Story 12. The fact that vaccines can cause autism. It has been found, and been proven several times, that the doctor who published the study that led to the spread of this news was being paid to find a way to sue vaccine producers. So he set the study up in a way to make it look like vaccines cause autism. To this day, it is one of the worst examples on how a piece of misinformation can never be erased once it passes a certain amount of spread. Answer. Yup. Andrew Wakefield. IIRC. He was also found to have subjected nearly a dozen disabled children to what could be described as medical torture by subjecting them to unnecessary and painful procedures, and then falsifying their test results when they didn't fit his narrative. He's probably second only to RFK Jr. in terms of sheer quackery and dangerousness. But enough people were pulled into his bullshit that no matter how much evidence exists proving he's full of shit and actually hurt children, they just won't believe it. Story 13. That ectopic pregnancies can be quote-unquote moved and still live. No, Becky, they can't. That ignorant politician clearly never passed intimacy ed. Once a pregnancy has implanted, that's it. That stem becomes the placenta and umbilical cord. The only treatment in 99.99% of cases is to end the pregnancy. Otherwise, both mother and fetus are almost guaranteed to die. It's either one dies or they both do, especially if it's in the fallopian tube. They have the diameter of a spaghetti noodle, and the whole area has a massive blood supply. An 8-week pregnancy, and its little sac is already the size of a large grape. Lots of people live in maternity care deserts. This is why abortion medications are essential to keep women alive. Look around at all the women of childbearing age around you, Becky. It could happen to any of them. Do they deserve to die for the sake of a doomed pregnancy? Answer. One of my mother's claim to fame is that I was a miracle child because she had an ectopic pregnancy, and the doctor opened her up, saw the ectopic pregnancy, and flicked it with his fingers until I dropped down into her uterus. The icing on the cake was that, according to her, my dad was told he would only father boys because of some delay with his testicles dropping. She even sang a song about me being her miracle child at my wedding. Story 14. Women don't feel any pain in their cervix because there are no nerve endings located there. This was actually the scientific belief until far too recently. Edited to correct spelling. Story 15. That some people believe a broken hymen means they're no longer a virgin. Hymens can break in a number of ways and can still remain intact after intimacy. Story 16. If your blood sugar is too low, you need insulin. Portrayed in a lot of movies, giving an injection to fix a hypo. Answer. The Diabetes Council in Australia ran a great ad back in the 1990s that explained really simply the relationship between blood sugar and insulin for diabetics. They used jelly babies as the central characters, stating that in the event of too much insulin, a jelly baby could save a life. It was a 30-second ad that was concise and informative while calling for donations for research. High-quality ads like that are something we're now missing as we move away from FTA TV. Story 17. Usually anything with the word toxins in it, but specifically, those people who are trying to cure autism with bleach. Story 18. I was raised as a Christian Scientist, not a real scientist though, and was basically told that sickness is just in your head and you gotta pray it away or have somebody else do it. It's weird, but people seem to die pretty young in that religion. Story 19. Rumor went around one of the high schools I attended. Apparently, shaking up a bottle of soda and spraying it inside the girl would prevent pregnancy. I physically recoiled in horror when one of my friends told me they'd done it. Story 20. Women can close their female body part if they don't want to have intimacy. Therefore, RP isn't possible unless she wants it. Black. I dislike even typing that out. Story 21. Idaho representative thinks a woman can swallow a camera pill for OBGYN doctors to perform a remote exam. Tom. Story 22. Not concerning, but just annoying. You do not catch a cold from being in the cold without a jacket or from the weather. You catch a cold from a pathogen. Answer. Yes, this. However, being out in the cold can slightly temporarily weaken your immune system and make you more susceptible to certain illnesses, including viruses that cause the common cold, as it prioritizes warming you up over immune responses. In cold weather, this maybe plays a very slight factor in the increased amount of colds. But that uptick in cold cases is usually because people are spending more time indoors around other people, and therefore have more opportunity to pick up pathogens. Story 23. The absence of information can be just as harmful as misinformation. My grandma tells a story that when she had her first child, she didn't know what makes a woman become pregnant, got the birds and the bees talk from the nurses in the delivery room while she was going into labor. That's not great, and a product of those times. Answer. Wow, what country was this? It's amazing how girls are kept ignorant about intimacy things. You think the mothers who grew up ignorant would want to make sure their daughters had the full information. But I know a couple girls, sisters, that learned about the birds and the bees from school friends because the mother wouldn't talk about it. They were Asian, living in US. Story 24. Oh, I have a lot one, that you can have a woman swallow a camera and it can enter the uterus. 2. Herd immunity is created from not being vaccinated as a community. 3. If I hear some Botoxed up influencer say the words detox or inflammation, then try to sell a supplement one more time, I'm going to explode. 4. The entire chiropractic practice as a whole. 5. RFK Jr.'s entire platform. Story 25. I've heard a lot, but the most horrifying one that I've only seen once was some guy who thought that clit and female body part were interchangeable terms. And when his GF said her clit doesn't have a hole, he said he'd make one. Story 26. A professor in an anatomy class I took a while back, who was a chiropractor I should add, told us that the reason LSD is called acid is because it melts tiny holes in your brain. Acids, bases, and how things absorb into the bloodstream are among the earliest things you learn in anatomy and physiology. And it's a hard class meant to filter people out. Usually people that dumb don't make it through the class. So I genuinely have no clue what this guy was thinking. It seems like basic knowledge that acidic does not mean cartoonish green acid that eats through everything. I'm not saying the substances is completely harmless, but it feels really stupid and dangerous to spread that kind of misinformation to people studying to become doctors and nurses when, aside from the risks of HPPD or mental issues, it's probably one of the safer, hard substances compared to other stuff out there. Story 27. That men need intimacy. Newsflash, men aren't special. A good intimacy life can improve the overall quality of any person's life. Women think about and want intimacy too. None of us need it. Story 28. That people need to do cleanses to remove toxins. Your body has organs for that. If those organs stop working, you need dialysis, not celery juice. Story 29. I was at a consultant appointment for an upcoming surgery. I had had scans done to check if I could manage the surgery and was told that my ligaments and tendons are too fragile. While there, I asked the consultant if I could have a letter sent to me about the findings. They asked why, and I explained that I was applying for disability as I'd been wheelchair-bound for months at this point and had lost my job. The doctor confidently and happily said, "Why? You don't need disability benefits. You could use your condition to become an Olympic gymnast." I pointed out that I was just confirmed to be too fragile for surgery, and that surgery was meant to prevent my knees and ankles from dislocating every day. "But you're so flexible, it doesn't matter. They would be amazed by you. You could get a gold medal." I pointed out that gymnastics involved a lot of skill, muscle, and precision. Me being flexible doesn't mean much if I can't even stand up reliably. The guy just kept going on about me winning a gold medal. Story 30. 1. That women's bodies hold on to semen DNA of every man they've had intimacy with. 2. The female body part gets permanently stretched out and loose from having intimacy. 3. Washing your jerk is gay. 4. Babies don't benefit from breast milk any more than formula. 5. Circumcision has health benefits. Story 31. When I was pregnant, a coworker told me to be careful because whatever happens to me will also happen to my baby. He said if I cut my foot, my baby would also have a cut on their foot. I was shocked. I didn't even know how to reply to that stupid comment. Story 32. Every pro-life billboard in Ohio. They are blatantly spreading misinformation disguised as facts. I do ultrasound for a living. Believe me when I tell you that a fetus does not have fingerprints or a heartbeat 18 days after conception. I promise. Story 33. Correlation is causation. One person's anecdote with some supplement likely doesn't apply to yours. Research studies in medicine that have any amount of certainty for general conclusions require tens of thousands of people to verify. And even then, said studies cannot generalize outside populations who were not well represented. Story 34. Honestly, just asking a man basic questions about women's anatomy will get you a pretty alarming answer. Answer. I was involved with, it was all awful, forgive me. A man who convinced all women menstruated on the 1st of each month, because that's how they did it in the army. When I had my monthly arrive around the 20th or whatever, and declined vaginal intimacy activities, he freaked all the way out. Mind-blowing, particularly given he had a mother and sisters. Story 35. That different races experience pain differently, some being less receptive than others, resulting in healthcare professionals withholding pain management for some and not others. Story 36. Republican politician Todd Akins shares his thoughts on violation in pregnancy. It seems to me, from what I understand from doctors, that is really rare. If it's a legitimate violation, the female body has ways to try to shut that whole thing down. Story 37. The vague and latest quackery buzzword, inflammation. According to influencers with no medical education, questionable critical thinking skills, and/or a degree in snake oil sales, it's everywhere, all over your body, inside and out, and it moves around to all your organs. Yikes. Story 38. Someone very close to me watched YT videos and then told me that cancer is the body shedding itself of toxins. I had to explain to them that we know what cancer is. The mystery is how to effectively cure it without damaging the body. Story 39. That if a woman gets pregnant from violation, she must have wanted it because the female body has a way to shut that whole thing down. Never forget Congressman Todd Akins. Story 40. ADHD is curable if you don't eat gluten. My mother. Autism is curable if you don't eat sugar. A friend's mother. Story 41. That women pee from their female body part can't pee with a tampon in, or that every woman suddenly becomes the most maternal matron in the mere presence of children. The brain rewires itself to go from not wanting children to living for them. Or that the cervix doesn't have nerves and thus cannot feel pain. Or that it's difficult or impossible for a woman not to climax from penetration alone. There's kind of a theme here. Story 42. Sigh. I teach human sexuality. Where do I start? With the adult female who argued with me in the textbook for over 20 minutes, explaining that everyone knows women pee out of their clitoris? Or the other adult female, different semester, who thought that PIV intimacy involves actual penetration of the cervix uterus in order to conceive. Or the adult male who thought women have cloaca. Or maybe the adult male who thought if a couple has intimacy in water, the sperm get confused and swim the other direction towards the light. Or the adult female who insisted that she knew the very second she became pregnant with each of her children because she could feel it. Or maybe the older non-traditional adult female who believed that self-care causes miscarriages. I know the adult male who actually came to my office to read the Bible to me after I explained about spontaneous abortion because I was a godless heathen encouraging young women to have abortions. Or the innumerable adult students I've had who simply cannot believe that pregnancy can happen even if one or both partners don't achieve climax. Or maybe the adult students who have asked if solo masturbatory paraphilic activities can result in pregnancy. Or the numerous students who insist that the female body part gets larger and loose the more intimacy partners a woman has. Yet strangely, intimacy doesn't whittle male body part down, and it's totally fine for a woman to have intimacy 2,000 times with the same man. But having intimacy once with 2,000 different men causes a loose female body parties. It defies all logic. And I'm not even going to get into the really gruesome, sexist, or racist stuff I could go on. I've been teaching on the university level for 20 years. Story 43. Aside from the current top comment, I remember being told by my little sister when we were teens that you were only supposed to be with one man ever, because the inside of your female body part would mold to the shape of his male body part. And I cannot. Thank the powers that be that I'm a lesbian, JFC. Story 44. That if it's natural, it's safe. Just gotta pour one out for the bros who are going to find out that THC is apparently increasing dementia rates in about 10 more years. Story 45. Almost everything men seem to believe about women's reproductive systems. From when periods start, whether it's a genuine indication of a girl's ability to sustain a healthy pregnancy and deliver safely for either the mother or child. What the experience of the menstrual cycle is actually like, and that it isn't the same for all women, both from a duration or intensity perspective, and that it's not something we can control. There is no sphincter to hold it in or release it. The actual process of fertilization and conception. What women's DNA does and doesn't control. Take your anger at not having boys somewhere else, dude. Primarily the mirror. The actual risks of pregnancy on the mother, the likelihood of miscarriages, and how the quality of male sperm is one of the largest contributing factors. How the body is deformed by pregnancy, and that it takes time to recover. What the experience of breastfeeding and being touched constantly by a baby or toddler does to our nervous system. That orgasms and enjoying or even consenting to intimacy are not directly linked. We are more likely to enjoy intimacy if we climax, but in climax doesn't equate to consent or enjoyment. It's a purely physical response like shivering from cold or flinching from pain. Lubrication is the same. A woman being wet does not mean she wants it unless she tells you that she does. Menopause means you no longer have a period. Perimenopause lasts for around a decade and is like a second puberty. Other than changes in your period, it also makes us incredibly angry, mostly because we have less estrogen to balance out the testosterone we also have naturally in our bodies. There's probably a heap more, but that's the bit that concerns me the most. They make decisions that affect our autonomy based on incorrect information and assumptions, and it eliminates us. Story 46. Women don't feel pain inside their reproductive organs, so it's okay to cut out samples of tissue without any type of numbing or anesthetic. Story 47. My ex told me not to swallow toothpaste because it could lead to pregnancy and becoming brain dead. He also said babies are born out off the asshole, so I just said to him, no, they are not, but would make sense if you were. Story 48. That you can restart a non-bearing heart with an electric shock. Even medical dramas perpetuate this myth. No, defibrillation is only for an irregular heartbeat. It shocks the heart to stop it in hopes that it will start back on its own with a regular rhythm. Most modern defibrillators will not shock if they can't detect a heartbeat. Learn CPR. There's a small chance you might save someone whose heart has stopped. Even then, you need to have someone call 911. Story 49. A sitting U.S. congressman confidently declaring that a woman's body has a way of shutting down reproduction in cases of legitimate violation. Really anything a politician says about women. Story 50. Not misinformation, but I remember a girl in my class asked me if she can get pregnant from swallowing semen. I remember being 13 and going, huh? Story 51. That black people don't feel pain the same way as white people. This racist lie is so insidiously woven into the fabric of the American healthcare system that even progressive and non-racist doctors believe it or versions of it. Black women, in particular, suffer and die because of the racism in healthcare. Story 52. Once heard that women only have one hole. So the anus, female body part, and urethra were all one. Same guy described a period as being constipated and having to shoot it out. Story 53. Swallowing chewing gum will never leave your stomach. I was once in an intense and important conversation for about 2 hours with no way to spit out my gum. By the end, it was a disgusting mush in my mouth. Can confirm it is digestible. Story 54. Mental health skeptics, in general. It's like they refuse to believe something only because they cannot see it. They just shut down at the thought of mental health. Story 55. I've had one too many people ask me how I don't need to change my tampon every time I pee. The amount of women and men who think we pee out of our female body part, especially at this day and age, makes me sad for humanity. We have men trying to control our bodies when then don't even know basic female anatomy. Story 56. Anything regarding the vulva and co. It's insane. All vulvas look the same. Big labia means no longer a virgin. Tampons make you lose virginity. Menstruation isn't a big deal. Blood flow can be controlled at will. You don't have to change that much. You do. Story 57. Up until the 1980s, it was believed that babies couldn't feel or remember pain. So it was common practice to perform major surgeries on newborns, including open heart surgery, without anesthesia. They only gave babies muscle relaxants to keep them still. They assumed the baby's cries were just reflexes, not conscious responses to pain. Story 58. Everything the right says about trans people. The worst part is it's just ignorant nonsense. But since it's repeated by right-wing news, seeing someone on TV echo your views feels empowering. But a close second is a few years back when you talked about Republican congresspeople, and you said, the violation guy. The person you're talking to would have to clarify which one. Story 59. If you have intimacy with the girl on top, she can't get pregnant because gravity stops the sperm from going up inside her. Story 60. Knew a guy in college who got a tooth abscess, which we was sure he could fix by holding a cheek full of white rum in his mouth at all times. He eventually ceded that it wasn't working when the infection blew out through his face. Story 61. It's dangerous to do CPR if you don't know what you are doing because you could break their rib cage. When you have to do CPR, the person is clinically dead. You literally can't make it worse. Story 62. Someone once told me, the darker your piss is, the better, because that means you're getting rid of toxins in your body. Girl, wished and drink some water. Story 63. Well, some people were misinformed that having intimacy with a virgin can cure your HIV. Famously ineffective and can lead to a host of follow-on problems. When it's clear that the Colorado documentary showed that injecting money is the only known cure. Or at least it was until Crispin Glover recently announced he can cure it. Story 64. MO Rep Todd Akin gave us this gem over 10 years ago now. During the interview for KTVI-TV on Sunday, Mr. Akin was asked about his no exceptions view on abortion, a highly charged issue in the U.S., and on whether he would like abortion to be banned, even if the pregnancy was the result of violation. He replied, "It seems to me, from what I understand from doctors, that is really rare. If it's a legitimate violation, the female body has ways to try to shut that whole thing down." Story 65. That the hymen breaks the first time a female has intimacy, and that it always bleeds. Neither of those things have to happen, and they in fact shouldn't unless things are too rough. Story 66. That all women enjoy G-spot stimulation. My wife, 45F, gets 0 from it and just says it feels weird. Story 67. Tylenol causing autism. On its own, it's not exactly, quote, concerning, but it's so profoundly stupid that it's concerning how anyone can actually believe it. Story 68. That if a woman is violation, her body can shut all that down and she won't get pregnant. This was an elected official BTW. Story 69. Even many well-educated people believe the wildest things about their bodies and health. There is a multi-billion-dollar alternative medicine industry taking advantage of that fact. Story 70. My stepdad told me, male, when I was 10 that I have to pop my nipples like a zit. Otherwise, they will swell and grow boobs. I spent 20 minutes in the bathroom trying to do this before I figured out that he was bullshitting me. Story 71. Dogs' mouths are cleaner than humans. Human mouths just harbor more kinds of bacteria that are easier to spread to other humans. That doesn't mean it's dirtier or has more bacteria in general. Story 72. Absolutely anything about certain people tolerating pain better. There may be statistical trends, but they should never, ever, ever, ever dictate how and what medical care is provided. Unfortunately, many doctors will treat black people redheads, and women with less care and less pain medication because these stereotypes are so prevalent. Story 73. That the urethra and the female body part are the same thing, same hole. I have known adult women who thought this. Story 74. That Tylenol causes autism and that depression doesn't exist. It's just the internet telling you things. Story 75. Periods and period trackers are basically gooning time for women. Didn't know I was gooning to myself since I was 12. This was said by a 30-year-old man who was married once. Story 76. I had a doctor tell me that I, mid-20s male, was too young to get cancer. It was in response to me asking her what cancer screenings I should get at my age. Story 77. When I was in college, I took a human sexuality course. The professor was a retired doctor, nearly 80 years old. He told us, multiple times, that the IUD is placed high up in the female body part. It's like he didn't even know what the letters IUD stood for. I reported him to the dean. Story 78. Oh God, so many. 1. Putting your arms up stops you from choking. 2. People can tell you with their voices that they are choking. 3. Feeding tubes can save your life if you have advanced dementia. 4. People can recover from being brain dead. 5. Salt and fat is bad for everyone. 6. The vaccine schedule is too much for little kids' bodies all at once. 7. Circumcision has any health benefits whatsoever. 8. You can choke on your tongue during a seizure, so put something in the person's mouth quickly. 9. Drowning is loud, dramatic, and obvious. 10. A sleepy newborn is always a happy, well-fed newborn. Story 79. It made national news, but being from Missouri, it terrifies me that U.S. Representative Todd Akin still got a significant number of votes to become senator. Essentially, he was asked about abortion rights and specifically abortion rights for violation victims. His answer was that women can't get pregnant from violation, which means any woman who did get pregnant after being violation must have secretly wanted it. If it's a legitimate violation, the female body has ways to try to shut that whole thing down. Todd Akin, 2012. Story 80. If it's a legitimate violation, the female body has ways to try to shut that whole thing down. Rep. Todd Akin, Republican, Moreau, 2012. Story 81. My mom thinks that if I get too many piercings, my ear will be rip-offable like tearaway pants or like tickets. Story 82. Honestly, while it may not be exactly a misinformation, I find it beyond baffling and unfair how women in some countries, I'm looking at you, USA, right after giving birth are expected to go back to work immediately, on top of caring for the newborn, and on top of still needing to heal and recover. Placenta leaves a dinner plate-sized wound inside of a woman's uterus. If anyone had a wound of that size literally anywhere else on their body, they would be required to rest until it heals completely. So why is this the norm? It just pisses me off whenever I think about it. Story 83. Anything and everything that men who can't find the clitoris have said about women's reproductive systems. Story 84. As many others have said, basically every piece of information about the female reproductive system, our genitals, periods, and everything in between, but also the amount of people, all in every gender, who still believe that men only get arousal when they're horny. In the UK, our intimacy ed features the usual traumatic viewing of what is essentially amateur adult content, followed by the horrific video of the miracle of birth. Then, in secondary school, we tend to get split into girls and boys and taught about periods and breast lumps. When I was in school anyway, I sincerely believe that there should be classes in all schools where every gender learns about everyone. Girls need to learn about boys. Boys need to learn about boys. And maybe a lot of adults should be returned to a lot of basic intimacy lessons all over the world. If only to stop the whole post-birth abortion bullshit that started. Story 85. That you can't pee with a tampon in because the tampon is in the pee hole. I met cis women who thought this. I had to mansplain the vulva to them. Story 86. I once heard an AFAB person think that it's bad to not menstruate, like continuously take birth control so prevent any periods, because the eggs will go bad. Public school is certainly failing kids. People with ovaries have thousands of eggs, more than they would be able to use even if they were pregnant constantly. Story 87. Whenever I was getting vaccinations in high school, early 2000s, UK, all the girls noticed that the nurses would inject the boys normally, but would give the girls more of a hard tap with the needle that hurt more. Someone asked one of the nurses why they did that, and she said it was because girls had tougher skin than boys, so they needed to put more force behind the needle to break the skin. Story 88. That vaccines aren't necessary because we have an immune system. My brother in Christ, if our immune systems were sufficient, how come every third world country with no access to vaccinations are kind of famous for having high infection rates for things like polio and whatnot? Story 89. As public health professional and former EMT who has worked through 5 pandemics, I implore everyone to understand that COVID is a different virus from SARS and MERS. Coronaviruses and COVID are not interchangeable terms. A virus and a disease are two different things. COVID-19 is referencing the coronavirus disease from 2019. The virus that causes COVID, SARS-CoV-2, was, at the time, a novel virus. This means it didn't exist in our lexicon previously. Story 90. Circumcision is medically necessary to maintain good hygiene. Do men in the Western world not wash their male body part? Story 91. I believe that men had one less rib than women because religion told me Adam made Eve from his rib. People told me that was a fact and I believed them until I was in college. That and Tylenol causes autism. Story 92. That some people cannot lose weight in a calorie deficit. That they're somehow immune to thermogenesis. Story 93. Shout out to my boyfriend in high school who insisted female body part have 3 different holes. The missionary, the doggy, and the cowgirl. I told him he was confusing 3 holes with the urethra, female body part, and anus because as a woman, I would know. He confidently told me a boy at school, who definitely had intimacy, told him, and therefore me, a woman with a female body part was wrong. Story 94. The sitting fudge U.S. congressman who claimed that the human body has ways of shutting down impregnation in cases of violation. Story 95. I reconnected with a friend from middle school after her divorce. She'd been in an abusive relationship, but I hadn't realized how bad it was until she offered to give me a BJ out of the blue. I declined because I knew intimacy had been an issue for her, but she kept offering, saying she didn't mind being my daily. When I pressed her about it, she explained that I shouldn't have to pay for the daily release since we were such good friends. I was confused, asked her to explain what a daily was. She laughed and said, "You know, so you don't die from the pressure buildup." She was a reasonably intelligent 27-year-old woman, so at first I thought she was just joking around or trying to coyly start a FWB situation. But the more I pressed, the more horrified I got. Turned out, when she got married at 19, her abusive, alcoholic ex had convinced her that if a guy doesn't get his male body parts sucked once a day, the cum keeps building up and can eliminate him. I was dumbstruck. I initially laughed it off, but she was dead serious, to the point of breaking down in hysterical tears whenever I'd try to insist it was BS. He'd started grooming her when she was 16 and he was 26 after they met at church. Her ex forced her to isolate and not talk to anyone else for 10 years, and in that time, it just cemented in her mind as fact. She allowed him to cheat for his daily release if he wasn't going to be home for an extended period, etc. It took literal years of therapy and support for her to break the conditioning. And even now, some 20 years later, she still feels the impulse to provide release once a day. Story 96. The 10% brain myth refuses to die. We use basically all of it, just not all at once. And scans show even a chill task lights up multiple regions. Same with the 2 liters of water rule. Drink to thirst, not a fixed jug count, because needs swing with heat, exercise, and salt. Fever panic is another one. 37C isn't a goal, it's an average, and adults often hit 38-39C with infections without melting down. Detox cleanses make the list. Your liver and kidneys do that 247, not a 3-day juice fast. Antibiotics for viruses are pointless and breed resistance. Lifting doesn't stunt growth in teens when coached properly, and rest days prevent injuries far better than fear. Bodies with uteruses don't need douching. It disrupts a self-cleaning system, and period syncing isn't strong science despite stories. If I had to pick one that actually harms most often, it's the antibiotic habit and the idea that a normal fever must be crushed immediately. Story 97. That women's bodies will shut down pregnancy in cases of legitimate violation. I nearly vomited while typing this because it's so awful on so many levels. Story 98. That women can somehow avoid getting pregnant if they're violation. It's a myth I've only ever heard from old men, but it's incredibly concerning that anyone would believe something that ridiculous. Story 99. I don't understand why you're sick like that during your period. Women have had their periods since the dawn of time. You're really cozy. Endometriosis diagnosed years later. I heard throughout my adolescence that periods were not painful. For some, I understand it, but it is not a generality. Even in 2025, I still suffer from it. Vomiting, migraines, stomach aches, etc. Calmed by medication now, but when I vomit too much, it is impossible to ingest the medication. Story 100. It may not be as important as the misconceptions about female bodies, but competitor, that when a male body gets a boner, it always means they want to have intimacy. You can get morning wood by increased blood flow or needing to pee. 10. You can just need to pee. You can get ones by just looking at something your brain finds attractive, even if you don't want to have intimacy. You can get one at random just because it decided so. No, it is not fully under your control. Yes, you can prompt it to go up or down, but you can't fully control it. Story 101. Type 1 diabetes can be cured by eating more vegetables. Cancer can be cured with essential oils. And I know this because someone told me, who heard it from a friend, whose aunt was cured of brain cancer. Story 102. Not the worst, but concerning. That women can breastfeed at any given time, like regardless of them nursing at the moment or ever having been pregnant. Story 103. That circumcision has so many benefits. Spoiler, it doesn't. I know people will bring their outdated facts, but they can all go jump off a bridge. It's generally not medically necessary and is genital mutilation. Leave the foreskin alone. Story 104. It's concerning that such a huge portion of the internet are spreading the lie that a woman's lower belly fat is her uterus or her uterus protector. I've even seen someone claim that the uterus swells to triple its usual size each cycle, and this is the reason for the belly. What is concerning is that the people spreading this false information sincerely believe themselves to be spreading a body-positive message. There's nothing body-positive about perpetuating myths about body fat and women's pelvic organs. There's no need to make excuses for having a belly, because nobody needs to be excused for having a belly. Body fat does not need to be excused. It's allowed to just be fat. It's just fat. You have a belly because you have fat. You may have a little fat or a lot of fat. But either way, your belly is not a shield to protect your uterus. Your uterus is lower down than most people's bellies are. Your uterus is in your pelvis, which is basically a cage of bone. That's what protects it. And besides, what is happening to you that puts your uterus at a particular risk from flying projectiles? Story 105. That it was intelligently designed. No self-respecting engineer would put the air intake next to the food intake, nor the exit port near the fun port. Story 106. That hereditary traits, genetics, are inescapable. Some of them may be, small percentage, but a lot is breaking the circle of bad habits. Story 107. That all fat people are lazy, when it really is a complex set of circumstances where laziness is only one part of why people become obese. Story 108. Lately, I've been seeing a bunch of misinfo about diabetes. The most alarming ones are that diabetics don't need insulin and that insulin causes diabetes. Story 109. That one Republican representative who thought women's reproductive system had a way to get rid of rapist sperm. Story 110. That you can close your female body part off so if someone tries to penetrate you against your consent, violation, then they can't. I saw it years ago. Someone was blaming a victim saying they should have just done that. Also that all AFAB people are born with an innie, and having an outie means you've slept with a ton of people. Story 111. On abortion. If it's a legitimate violation, the female body has ways to try to shut that whole thing down, meaning pregnancy. And I'd love for a Republican to explain to me what an illegitimate violation looks like. Story 112. That women pee out of their clitoris. This was my ex-girlfriend who told me this. I had to inform her where she actually peed from. She also thought that Alaska was right next to Hawaii, and that both were barely off the coast of California, because that's where they were on the map of the US. Story 113. Not gonna lie, I misread misinformation as information in the title of this post, and I was about 10 comments deep before I realized that I wasn't learning some really outlandish shit about the human body. Story 114. Oh, and that your hymen being intact means you're a virgin, or that if it's not intact, you're not a virgin. It can literally break if you fudge sneeze, and that legitimate violation is a thing because the body can physically reject unwanted advances. Story 115. That you can't get genital herpes from oral herpes, or vice versa. It will gladly go wherever you take it. Story 116. I'm not sure if it's the most concerning, more like stupid. I had a guy tell me you can get high by eating raw plant substance because your stomach acids are hot enough to cook it. Story 117. I remember going along my merry way whistling some tune, and some guy turned towards me genuinely surprised and said, "I didn't know women can whistle." Then I kept whistling and moving along. Story 118. A lady told me insulin makes you go blind. They soon went blind, lost their leg and died because no one could convince them they had diabetes. Completely preventable, and yet they kept telling others that it was because the doctors gave her insulin. Story 119. I remember being taught that blood was blue and turned red when exposed to oxygen. I didn't care which teacher said this to me, but I know other kids believed it too. Story 120. When I was very young, a very old person told me that black people ran faster than white people because they had an extra tendon in their legs. My husband was told it was an extra bone. Old people in the American South still believe stuff like that then. I suppose some probably still believe it. Our parents quickly corrected this misinformation. Story 121. That medications are bad because it makes your body dependent on it. Ma'am, your body already has hypertension. Medication helps control it, unless you prefer letting it go out of control, eventually destroying your kidneys and eyes. Story 122. That the period is the equivalent to male self-care. I think it'd be female self-care, but what do I know? Story 123. If it tastes good, then it's obviously good for me. Food has nothing to do with your mental health. I know someone who will eat and drink literally nothing else but Starbucks and chicken nuggets for weeks at the time. No joke, straight sugar and salt for days at a time. On the few days they don't have access to it, they completely crash and blame their low energy on anxiety, depression, ADHD, OCD, bipolar, etc. The brain-gut connection is very real. If you consistently eat like shoot, you are consistently going to feel like shoot. Story 124. Not a lot. I'm going to go with the one that carbs are bad for you. They are actually great for you in moderation. Story 125. Once, my mom was telling an anecdote about someone she knew whose son fractured his pelvis in a sports accident. My younger sister laughed and said, "Pelvis? That's a girl part." We told her that the pelvis is a bone. She said, "Yeah, a girl bone." She was like 13 and I guess just dissociating during health class. Story 126. If it's a legitimate violation, the female body has ways to try to shut that whole thing down. U.S. Congressman Todd Akin. Story 127. That having intimacy with multiple people makes your female body part loose, but having intimacy with the same man multiple times doesn't. Story 128. The amount of people that tell me I am not disabled cause I don't look like it. Sorry for growing hair over my scars and having my artificial body parts inside. I wish I was the Winter Soldier, but well. Story 129. I got into a fight with my brother over now Plan B works. I explained several times that you can have intimacy and not become pregnant for several days from that intercourse event. An egg must meet the sperm and then attach to the uterus wall. Sperm can live in the uterus for days, waiting for an egg to drop. All the Plan B pill does is cause you to have a period, and therefore shed your uterine lining, preventing an egg from attaching to the wall. This is why the Plan B pill is not abortion, because you can't have an abortion without having a fertilized egg attached to a uterine wall. Story 130. If the man has morning sickness during the pregnancy, the baby is a girl. If the woman has morning sickness, baby will be a boy. Story 131. That women need to have periods, or that it's unhealthy to skip them. Nope, it doesn't work for everyone, but taking oral contraceptives or a variety of other birth control methods can allow you to safely no longer have periods, provided you don't want to have children. Story 132. Common misinformation na two, pero I will still drop it here. Na female body parts should smell like flowers and cotton candies. Hello? Open organ po ang female genital, kaya normal ang natural odor. Story 133. I'm going to go with vaccines cause autism, because avoiding Tylenol doesn't cause measles outbreaks. Story 134. Whenever men say that women only have one hole down there, and never even think that women might just have a urethra as well. Story 135. An uncle's wife think you can cure cancer and autism by eating large quantities of coconut oil and drinking some kind of green smoothie. English is not my first language, sorry for any mistake made. Story 136. That we only use 10 of our brains. This has gone so mainstream for decades, and it's absolutely not true. Story 137. My dad is convinced that to build muscle, you have to eat tons of carbs and fat. Not protein, fat and carbs. Story 138. Guy on a UK TV show about clinic blaming his still on her not washing inside her vag. Oh, and that paracetamol causes autism. Story 139. Women bleed for 3 weeks, and during their week off bleeding, they are horny AF and try to fudge anything that moves. Story 140. I had a hysterectomy in 2021 where they took out my uterus, cervix, and fallopian tubes, but left my ovaries. And some lady on FB tried to tell me I could still get pregnant because I have ovaries and still ovulate. I was just like, ma'am, I'm missing a couple of very essential parts for pregnancy. Story 141. I have such a good one. My health teacher in year 7, when she was explaining to us what periods were, told us we can't get our hair wet during our period. Massive scare for me and my friends. Eventually broke down crying to my mom saying I couldn't shower cause I was on my period, and she told me it was a wives' tale. Like what? This was like 2011. Story 142. That having intimacy with multiple people will make a woman's genitals loose, but having multiple intimacy with one person will not. The amount of people that think spicy foods will cause stomach ulcers, and believe that the guy who ate all the spicy Cheetos ended up in the hospital with an ulcer. I won't deny he had health issues, but I just don't think it was because of an ulcer. Story 143. As a trans man, transition has really proven to me how little most cis men know about how women work. Even things that also affect them, like thinking that people with XY chromosomes are the only ones whose bodies produce testosterone. I genuinely feel like having been a girl made me a better man. Story 144. I've been seeing a lot of false info about birth control recently. Look, the pill has been around for decades. The science is crystal clear, and they are effective if taken properly. The amount of times I've seen I am on the pill and we used a condom, could I be pregnant? On the birth control subs has been infuriating. Source. I have a master's degree in public health. Story 145. If it's a legitimate G violation, the female body has ways to try to shut that whole thing down. Todd Aiken. Story 146. Women magically turn infertile the second they turn 40. Thought in Saudi Arabian schools in the 2000s. And who knows, maybe they still do nowadays. Story 147. That black people feel less pain than white people. Not only ridiculous, but actually dangerous. That vaginal canals can get stretched out from intimacy. That all people with female body part climax from male body part in female body part intimacy when the vast majority, 80, do not. That labia are too big, too small, too whatever. There are as many variations of vulvas as there are of male body part. Story 148. Having worked in pediatrics and urology, the misconception that the human foreskin is useless or just extra skin that you don't need. Far too many people just consider circumcision to be the default, when in reality there's absolutely no medical benefit to having it unless you have a medical condition which warrants it as a necessary procedure. And even then, it's a last resort, as there's plenty of less invasive procedures that should be done first to treat things like phimosis. Story 149. A friend of mine told me she couldn't get sunburnt because she's black, so that weird feeling on and under your skin is just a figment of your imagination. Story 150. That the female body can shut down getting pregnant in the case of violation. But my new favorite is that one LA senator who said that eating the radioactive shrimp from Walmart will have you sprouting a cheek-bursting alien, just like in the movie Alien. He even brought big giant pictures to demonstrate. Story 151. That your uterus sticks out of your stomach and causes a pouch. Not. It doesn't, it sits in your pelvis. It does not bulge out. I don't know who needs to hear this, but that's not your uterus. It's fat. Story 152. That AFAB people can just shut down their bodies if they are ARPed, meaning we can't get pregnant. Unless what? We want our ARPus attack to lead to a possible child? Fucking gross. This was a government official in charge of determining our access to healthcare, by the way. Story 153. Most annoying. You either have a fever or you don't. 38 degrees centigrade, or 100.4 in freedom units. There is absolutely no such thing as a low-grade fever. That's a nonsense word lay people use. It's not a real medical term. Answer: yes, but yes, this applies for most people. However, if you have a naturally lower resting body temp by a few degrees, then a fever will be different for you, e.g. people with autonomic disorders. Also, I think a low-grade fever is a way people describe a fever that's not a high fever. I would consider a high-grade fever as over 40 and unable to bring down using OTC meds. It's not exactly misinformation, but a layman's interpretation. Story 154. 1. A man said that a woman can squeeze her female body part tight enough and not let a man grape her. So obviously, if she is graped, that means she wanted it. Otherwise, her body wouldn't have let him in. 2. A man thought a fetus moved around the entire human body and that sometimes you could feel it kicking in other areas other than the stomach. He asked, "So can you feel the baby kicking in your knee?" 3. Apparently, a lot of men don't think women's hair grows, like, at all. They think once you cut it, it's gone forever. Story 155. First responders will let you die if you're an organ donor, and you're alive while the organ is harvested. Story 156. There are so many the absolute worst that black, especially women, couldn't feel pain or don't feel pain as strongly. It's fudge ridiculous and was in medical textbooks. A 2016 study showed half of white medical trainees still have beliefs that make them believe black people can't experience as much pain. It's ridiculous and probably false, and yet something active medical providers today believe. A side note of it being really stupid, you would think, if the providers genuinely believed that because of the color of someone's skin, they couldn't feel as much pain, they would be more likely to take their pain that they complained about seriously, because it must be worse. Nope. These racist bastards use it as an excuse to deny pain medicine. Story 157. That calories in, V's out doesn't apply to you because of whatever medical condition, or your age, or menopause, or low T, or whatever. The truth is that your body obeys the law of conservation of energy. Also that you can cut out whatever boogeyman ingredient and the weight will magically fall off. That's not true either. Source: I've lost 50 pounds since March of this year, and not once have I cared about carb seed oils, MSG, whatever. Story 158. 1. Humans only use 10% of their brain. 2. PDF is a rare mental disease. Seems more common on the rich. 3. Fat is bad. 4. If the woman hymen is broken, it means she's not a virgin. 5. You're not fat, just have big bones. Story 159. If you're overweight, well, that's just how you're supposed to be, and there's nothing you can do about it. Story 160. That conservatives are produced through anal intimacy, and that's why they are such ignorant assholes. Story 161. My wife once slapped me for poking her belly button. We were 19 and 18, and she was still under the impression it would eliminate her, which was something her dad told her growing up. Story 162. Women's bodies have a goalie if they're violation. Won't let that little tadpole in. She's pregnant? She must have wanted it. Story 163. Pretty much anything the U.S. government and its gaggle of misanthropes utters. How can Americans stand it? Story 164. That women's bodies can shut down pregnancies that are the result of violation. Here's an article about the passing of the idiot who said it. Story 165. I forget the exact wording of it, but there was that government official who said that there are things that a woman's body can do to stop a pregnancy if it's a, quote, legitimate violation. Story 166. There are so many. But one, intimacy, is that all women owe from PIV and that men can tell when a woman has an O. Just the fact that so many men are convinced that all their lovers have owed is concerning. Story 167. I thought that when someone says that you're ducked in all holes, it means ears and nose. I've never thought of mouth. And I've never known about womanhood. I can say more. Even as an adult, I'm still not 100% sure how it works. And it's because one guy when we were kids said that girls have something like black lines but not a hammer, and there's nothing except black line. I always thought that I'm half woman. Story 168. That dairy is good for us, or that we can't be healthy without consuming it. Concerning because of the magnitude of the campaign to get us to believe it was. Story 169. I informed my late mom that she does not pee out of her vaginal canal. There's a separate hole for urine. She was in her late 40s or early 50s when we had that conversation. Story 170. The most concerning, definitely, was when I was 4, and my mom told me that if I swallowed melon seeds, melons would start growing out of my stomach. I've never been more concerned. Story 171. Once saw a man say that women can't get violation because their body has a way of shutting that down. Fairly confident he was actually referencing duck anatomy, if memory serves right, not even human anatomy. Definitely heeded a lot of wild misinfo from men on women's bodies, but that definitely has to be the most concerning one I've ever heard. Story 172. That one politician who said, in case of legitimate violation, the woman's body has a way of shutting that whole thing down, to justify being anti-abortion, even in violation cases. Story 173. That circumcision is medically necessary for hygienic purposes, and the majority of Americans just don't care and continue to mutilate their neonate sons. Story 174. Intersex conditions are rare. They are actually not as rare as people think. Intersex people exist. There are a wide variety of intersex conditions. It's concerning because it's still so taboo, and people ignore the fact that a lot of intersex people have undergone surgeries as infants or small children in many cases to change intimate parts of their bodies to conform to a biological intimacy another person chose for them, without their knowledge in many instances. Story 175. TikTok video claiming that pregnancy being more difficult or risky unlikely after 40 was a scam. Had hundreds of thousands of likes and comments agreeing with it. Echo chambers are wild. Story 176. It's crazy that no one has said that it's still medically taught that black people don't feel as much pain as white people, therefore are not always listened to, and end up dying as a result. 4 times more black pregnant people die in childbirth than their white counterparts. Story 177. That women have higher pain tolerance. No, that's just systemic misogyny at work. Women have to hide their personal feelings and pain constantly, such as in the workplace, with kids, etc. And a good chunk of us are taught to grit our teeth and bear a lot of unreasonable, including pain. Story 178. Did you know that medically speaking, apparently, the safest and best way for a woman to give birth is actually on her hands and knees. Apparently, the only reason we do giving birth while laying on our backs is because one day, some king in France wanted a good view of his children giving birth, so his doctor decided that going forward, the proper way to give birth is laying on your back. Story 179, that you can't get pregnant while on your period. Chances are very low and depends heavily on your cycle length, but it does happen. Story 180, people telling me that my medication is all just placebos and that it's all in my head. I'm a diagnosed schizophrenic with epilepsy, BTW. Really makes me concerned for the future of human civilization. Story 181, that our immune systems don't start functioning until 6 months post-birth, so vaccines at birth don't even work. Story 182, my nephew's baby mama thinks if she gets her tubes tied, she'll go into menopause. I had to explain the reproductive system to a 26-year-old mother of 3. Story 183, not really concerning, but that if you swallow gum, it stays inside you for 7 years. It doesn't get digested, but it passes through and out of you into the toilet fairly quickly. Story 184, that women shouldn't be wet before intercourse. Just say you're bad at intimacy and move on. Also, for folks who have medical issues with this, there's lube. Why would lube exist if wetness wasn't necessary? Story 185, there is a movement called breatharianism that claims humans don't need to eat food, and some claim humans don't need water either. Many adherents die of starvation or dehydration, but there are a few alleged adherents who claim they have lived years or decades without consuming anything except air, sunlight, life force, the energy of the universe, and other such nonsense. Story 186, you need to flush out toxins with detox diets or cleanses. Humans have kidneys and a liver for a reason. Story 187, my own mother said we have babies and pee out of the same hole. She also told me darker urine was healthier. Story 188, this is a bit racy, but back in high school in my day, boys liked to spread the misinformation that if arousal weren't taken care of, the pain could be fatal. That's it for this video. Don't forget to support Vancher and my second channel, Vancher. See you soon.